Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the ReQuest. I'm Captain Logan, and joining me, as always, is my good buddy Austin, the Day Ghost. And guesting tonight on the program is my regular chat moderator and producer from the Captain Logan Show. It's DJ Martinez. Hello, DJ.
This is my first time on the show, and I wasn't looking at Austin when he did that. I was like, does he start with a dolphin call every time? What was that?
About 75% of the time, I'm not sure what the joke is. This time, it was the most obvious possible thing he could have done, and DJ's like, I don't get it.
No, I almost stopped for a second because I could see the fear in DJ's eyes.
I was looking over here at I was looking at my other monitor, and then I heard ee. I was like, whoa.
He's just doing a porpoise. Tonight's movie was requested by John Early. Thanks a lot to him. And this one's unusual in that usually people ask me to review stuff that I either have never seen to try to kind of expand my palette a little bit, or something that I haven't seen in a good long time. And not that everybody is aware of everything I've ever looked at, but of course Psycho's a thing that I've referenced a decent amount on the channel, and DJ and I have reviewed something related to that because we talked about Bates Motel right after it ended, and that was, we talked about this in a video the other day, but that was the first thing that DJ and I ever did together on camera, which is one of the reasons I was really hoping he'd be here, and also because DJ is just a big fan of Psycho and the series in general.
Yeah, the first thing we ever did 3 years ago. We've come full circle. It's crazy. It's crazy that was only 3 years ago. Like,
we're professionally breaking up after this. Like, we had a perfect bookend. It's been a good run. There's really no reason for us to work together anymore after this.
Yeah, I don't want to push our friendship, beyond its heights. So I mean, we've had a good run. It was a perfect ending. Let's just end it here. Bye, guys. I'll do the video first.
See you later. Yeah. Well, I feel like at the very least, at some point, we have to also get to maybe the Psycho Rangers, because one of the first things you and I also did together was Power Rangers, and then Psycho was before that, and then so it is kind of weird if we never do Psycho Rangers.
That's true. That's true.
Anyway, so
there's a bunch of guys in Power Rangers that can morph into their moms and fight monsters. That's a little strange.
I wouldn't even put that past the anime or whatever the whatever it's called.
That was a whole joke the other day in a live show that somebody brought up, the insane notion of remaking Psycho but with the Psycho Rangers.
Oh God.
You get to the end and it wasn't Norman Bates thinking that he was his mom, but in fact just all of the Psycho Rangers simultaneously. Like, how many Psycho Rangers does it take to kill a woman in a bathroom?
Well, they're not very smart.
Or screwing a light bulb. I don't know. We may never know.
Anyway, well, let's go. So, like I said, this one is unusual because this is material that Austin and I and DJ are all three real familiar with already, and this will be less, of course, of a first impressions kind of video and more of an overview of this movie that we already have an affinity for. So first off, let's get just Austin and DJ's histories with this movie. We've talked to DJ about this before, so let's hear from Austin, because Austin is a big horror guy and got really super stoked when I told him that we were reviewing this movie. So Austin, what is your history with this film?
What is my history with this film? This is one of those movies where I can't remember a time where I hadn't seen it. But I also feel like I saw it in high school, so it wasn't even that
Austin has
early.
no memories before high school. That's where his memories start.
No, I watched Psycho and it bled into my memories.
It's horrifying.
I just remember.
I have that with Star Trek, but the difference is that's a wholesome, kid-friendly thing, and this is not.
No, the only memory I have of this before I saw it is that, and I think I told DJ about this the other night. I was visiting my cousin, and I was like, "Oh, we should watch Psycho," and I turned it on, and he went, "Oh, this isn't black and white. Okay, never mind. Turn it off." And we watched something else. But
that makes me want to go Norman Bates on your cousin.
I know, right? I'm pretty sure I did at the time too. He's not around anymore. But no, Psycho's a fantastic film. It's probably, I think it's been a while since I've like ranked horror films, but it's in my like top 20, top 10, like around that point. It's like right up there. It's a masterpiece. It's great.
DJ, what is your background with this movie?
Yeah, same here. It's probably in my top 10 too, if not top 20. It's probably around the same.
Of course, big difference with you is you're not a horror guy.
Exactly. The horror is not what attracted me to this, and it's not even really the Hitchcock that attracted me initially, because I've seen about 10 Hitchcock movies now, but this was the first one I saw. Like Kat mentioned, this is what first got me into this show. Into this movie. I really got into this show even before I met Cap. We didn't talk about it till the 5th season. For some reason, I think it was Freddie Highmore, because I really liked him as an actor. But I went through and I watched all these shows. I bought all these shows. This is like the last show that I actually bought on Blu-ray. I don't buy TV shows anymore. But about 2 seasons in is when I watched this movie, because I got really sick, I remember, and I binged like the 2nd season in like a day or two, just like sitting in bed. And I was like, well, I'm out of this. There's nothing else. The 3rd season doesn't come out for like a year, so I might as well watch the movie. So I watched the movie for the first time under the perfect circumstances. My wife was out of town, or I don't think she was my wife yet, but she was out of town. I was home alone in the tiny little apartment, and I was like pitch black. I watched it late at night by myself in the apartment, and it freaked the crap out of me. Like, I was not expecting. I was terrified. I was the only person in the apartment. Like, when I was going around, like, getting ready for bed and like getting in the shower the next day, like, I was genuinely creeped out being in the apartment all by myself. And I was hoping,
which is amazing after already watching 2 seasons of the TV show.
Yeah,
that like
right?
the movie could still bother you. That's really interesting.
It's so well done. And that was the problem, is I kind of knew, because I'd seen the show, it doesn't come right out and do anything from the movie in the first 2 seasons, but you can tell where you can figure out the surprise ending of the movie because of what you know in the show. So I kind of knew, but still
you'd have that from just cultural osmosis.
That's what I was going to ask you, is if you had the osmosis thing. Like, it's interesting. I wonder how many other people were watching Bates Motel just because, like, the premise of the show intrigued them, just watching the pilot or something, and didn't really know anything about the film.
I'm probably the only one.
I mean, that's really interesting.
That is really interesting.
What even made you like think to watch it?
Like
the TV
Highmore.
show.
Freddie Highmore.
Oh, just Highmore. Okay.
And I think my wife's a big crime TV person, so it was more up her alley, and I started it with her. So yeah, it was total chance, and now it's one of my favorite movies. So I'm glad it all happened that way. But yeah, it creeped me out, and I was hoping that I would have that experience again this time. I tried to recreate it. Like, I watched it downstairs by myself, and it was really late at night yesterday, and it was dark and it was raining outside. It was like the perfect conditions again, but it didn't freak me out again. There's like
the movie did scar you
behind me a little bit, but then like it didn't stick with me, just because you know what the ending, you know what's happening, you know what's gonna come, because it's so iconic. Like, everything sticks with you so well. It doesn't surprise you again, which is a little sad, but it's great.
It did scar you to the point though where I could scare you just by doing the noise.
Yeah,
I don't think that scared him so much as just wondering if there were like
confusion.
Water animals around.
I'll look at your pantomimes next time you're doing impression, so I can be totally up to date with what's going on.
Yeah, the hard thing about going back to a movie like this, obviously, is that it's impossible to ever recreate the same experience you had with The Thing again a second time around, but especially when so much of the movie is about the big surprise ending and that everything isn't going the direction you thought it was in the first place. So repeat viewings end up being a lot more about appreciating the art and the craft, and seeing details that you didn't notice before, especially things that might have been leaving breadcrumbs about where things were going. So it's interesting.
So much foreshadowing.
It's kind of interesting with a thing like this to kind of retrace your steps and go backwards and like see that it was just how tight it is. Because you can't know that from a first viewing. You won't necessarily recognize everything that was always there and like clearly leading to the big surprise, and so it's got that Fight Club thing and the Sixth Sense thing, and I'm only referencing things that came after this, but it's that kind of Twilight Zone effect where you're never going to have the same viewing twice with it.
Yeah.
And interestingly, Hitchcock is making this at the same time as he's making Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and with the same film crew, and he kind of tried to shoot it in some ways like an episode of that show, or at least budgeted like an episode of that show. I think it could have almost gotten away with being called Alfred Hitchcock Presents the Movie. And I don't know that it would have done as well if that's what it had been, but it's basically an elongated episode of that show. But of course, like a much more, it's a much more sophisticated artistic piece than an episode of that show, which would of course had to be shot and put together much more quickly than something like this. But this whole thing started with Hitchcock saying, here's all these like really terrible low budget horror movies, and the problem with them isn't how little it costs to make them, it's just that there's no artistry behind them. So he goes, what if somebody good made this? I saw an interview with I think his wife, who said that his whole thing was, what if somebody good did this? And so that's what he did. So he was like, it's gonna be made for less than $1 million, and it's gonna be made in black and white, solely because he thought that it would look too gory and he wouldn't be able to even get away with putting it out if it was in color. But it also has the added effect of just looking, like somebody said in the comments earlier, hi everybody live in the comments right now, it looks cheaper that way, and that's kind of what he was going after.
Yeah, I read that it was only $800,000.
It was almost a TV movie too, and famously as well, like when he finished, he kind of looked at it and was like, "Oh, this is kind of rough, I think." And then he got the score or something like that, and he gave the woman who did the score a raise because he was like, "You helped save this movie."
Which is interesting because I think it looks great. I think it holds up really well. I think it was ahead of its time with especially the cinematography.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a really good-looking movie.
Well, everything about it is ahead of its time, and I think one of the hardest things to do, looking back at Psycho, no matter how hard we might try, is to have any kind of real historical. What's the word I'm looking for?
Perspective.
Yeah, like how do you have any perspective on a thing like this, because it's arguably the first in a subgenre. So like when you're looking at essentially the first slasher film, or the first one that really matters, and looking back as desensitized as we are now, it's really difficult to appreciate how much this affected audiences. Like I know DJ said that when he first saw it, it actually did kind of freak him out a little bit. But if you're watching
but
this,
I still had modern sensibilities of like the sexual and violent stuff. Like back then, it was way more shocking.
Yeah, way more shocking, and a lot of things that it's hard to like. Not only is it hard to appreciate that this would have actually scared people and they're screaming at the screen and people might be thinking about running out of the theater and all of that, but it's also hard to appreciate all of the things that that the movie barely gets away with, that you take so much for granted now. And you of course hear that a lot with censorship with movies during this period, but this especially feels obviously really tame by modern standards for sexual things and some of the violence and stuff, and is intentionally not showing you much of anything as far as violence goes, because you're supposed to use your own imagination. But things as simple as you never saw a toilet in a movie before this.
Yeah.
That's not a thing that was even hardly allowed, and
he had to fight for it. It wasn't allowed. Yeah, he had to really push for it.
The flushing, right? This is the first film.
Yeah,
I've heard it was
first
really
movie
on
where you
screen.
get Flushing. Although DJ,
Because the toilet itself is in the trailer, so I always thought it was just the flushing itself.
Maybe
yeah,
so.
The greatest trailer of any film ever
I've
made.
never watched the trailer. I should do that.
yeah, it's great.
Wonderful. It's just Alfred Hitchcock walking around the set being like, "Oh, yep, this is where this happens." It's pretty freaky.
So much clout. I could just do that. Well,
It's
just the
awesome.
stuff in the beginning about just them having an affair was risque at the time.
Yeah, and things as seemingly mundane as a bra where you can see the like mechanism in the back, like that. Like you would see bras, but you couldn't see clasps and stuff.
Oh man, when I was a boy, all I wanted was a clasp. Because you have a clasp, that would just get me through the whole night.
DJ.
Which is funny because the bra thing, there's also like a thematic thing in the terms of the color of it,
Right.
where it's white, where at the beginning, and then she takes the money, and then it's black, and then I think when you see it again afterwards, she decides to bring the money back, it's white again.
Oh, cool.
But DJ was just like that clasp.
That's all I was looking at. The clasp stayed the
Exactly.
same color the whole time.
But yeah, I think it's impossible to appreciate just how risque this movie was.
Yeah, well, even this time I was thinking about it, and because I know you mentioned like kind of first of the slashers, but I also think of this as just one of the kind of proto slasher, even smaller subgenre, with stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween, where it's kind of just before they become just about the kills, like where they're still just people trying to make movies. And I think it's even slightly more graphic than some of that stuff, like in terms of blood, anyways. Obviously, it's black and white, so it's just black, but like there's not much blood in either of those films. It's probably like around the same.
Yeah, this is before we get into the habit of like the kill happening right off screen. Like the kill happens for like 15, 20 seconds and it just continues to keep happening. It's pretty raw. It's pretty rough.
Mhm. No, and the cutting of that scene is just perfect. And
Well,
it just like Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre especially, the way it's edited makes it feel like you're seeing a lot more than you actually are.
Mm-hmm. And the sound effects of them like stabbing a melon, I think, is how they got that effect. Ugh.
Yeah, well, and it's visceral editing. So like it's not just about you using your own imagination, but it's about like the rhythm of it. Like that, a lot of why it feels as graphic as it does is because of like the jumping around that happens, and I forget if it was the writer or one of the or somebody else on set. I forget who it was that I saw say that, or maybe it was even what's her face who plays Marion.
Janet Leigh.
Yeah, I think it was her who said that the cutting in the editing is supposed to enhance the like slashing itself, where it's like even the word cut. Like I never really thought of that before, but
Yeah,
like
'cause it
that's a
changes
good
each
call.
stab. Mhm. Absolutely.
Like,
And
we're
then you
cutting
go and watch
film,
that
we're cutting
scene
her.
with
Like
the-
that's never thought of that. That's good.
And then you watch
Yeah,
it in
yeah.
the remake, and they like cut random shots
Oh
into
my-
it.
Ugh. Have you seen that, Cap?
What's
We
that?
don't need to talk about that. The remake.
I have.
Yeah, we've all seen that.
I
Wow.
saw it in high
I've
school.
wish I had-
seen that clip. I've never seen the whole movie.
Okay. I wouldn't. You don't have to. Please don't. Save.
I'm
But
not
that seems like a you thing, though, to watch a movie that you know is terrible.
It's
so.
one of the most. I mean, I can't even call it terrible.
That
It's
will
just
be funny.
pointless. Like that is one of the most self-indulgent projects in the history of self-indulgent projects. Like it's an interesting experiment, and that it should have been left at that and never released in a movie theater. Like the whole point of it was just to see if it could be done, and like
Well, it's the Lion King.
it's not even
2019.
done well,
It is,
but
yeah.
like okay, they did it, I guess. Like the acting's not as good, and there's places where they go too far because I for some reason went back and saw that again. I don't know, maybe a decade ago, and I remember that like everybody always talks about that as a shot-for-shot remake, and like it's a scene-for-scene remake, and all the important shots are kind of the same, but there are places where they take things way too far. Like,
yeah, you get that with Norman, where
if
he like looks
memory
through the eye
serves,
hole.
there's like, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like,
Yeah.
isn't he in the remake like clearly straight up masturbating in that scene?
Yeah. Well, and that's what they do in the TV show too.
And in fact, but the TV show can take any kind of like indulgences and luxuries it wants to, because it's Smallville. It's a reimagining. It's a prequel reimagining thing. I mean, there's like we can get into this a little bit, DJ. There are several details even about the origin of Norman Bates and the motel and everything that's different in the show than it is here. Like from the word go in that pilot, they're doing a really good job of telegraphing this is not supposed to be straight up that same world and that same story. And I mean, obviously it's set in modern day, so it's not going to be anyway, but right away they're going, some details are going to be different. It's not exactly the same thing.
Yeah. And those things stuck out to me having seen the show first, especially this last time. I was surprised at how much I remember from that show, but
yeah, same here, because I was like, I mean, it's been a long time. I was like, it would be interesting to do some comparing and contrasting, but I don't remember anything about that show. And yeah, some things started to come back to me. Like, DJ, I don't recall. I mean, this is a thing I'm just not remembering for sure. I don't recall if in the TV show, when he finally gets to the taxidermy, if he only does birds. I seem to recall he does other stuff.
No, that is a strong
departure.
He stuffs his own dog.
That's right.
In the movie specifically, he says, "I could never stuff a dog or a cat, or I don't like the way beasts look when they're stuffed." And then he says specifically he can only do birds. Now that could be. I thought that could either be a huge difference that they did on purpose, or it could be him like blocking out his past, like, and they could justify it that way in the show where he did do that, but he's like so horrified by it that he blocks that out, or he pretends like it never happened.
Yeah, but, sure. Like he only does birds now.
Yeah, but because the show quickly got to the movie, like I thought the show was going to be way, way before the movie and never get to the movie, but because they got all the way to the movie, that doesn't really work.
Well, and also you don't have exactly the same. I mean, like the main broader themes are the same, but a lot of the symbolism is a little bit different in the show, because they don't do as much with the bird motif. So like that's not as important. I mean, if you're not going to introduce Marion Crane until your 5th season, I'm not sure how much of a bird motif you can really have. Her last name is Crane. That's kind of intentional.
Man, he's surrounded by birds of prey.
But you have things like in the movie, we're told that the hotel was built, that the mother commissioned the motel to be built. And
the boyfriend convinced her to have it built.
That's what it was, yeah. And I'm pretty sure in the TV show they just go buy it, like it's just there already. Just
that's the first episode. Yeah, she just
old
buys
hotel, and then immediately after that they have the bypass.
Well, and
like in
Hitchhiker's
Guide to the Galaxy, they build a bypass because bypasses have got to be built. We have to build bypasses.
and obviously, like the boyfriend in the show, spoiler alert, is the cop who happens way after she buys the hotel. So it's all. They take a lot of liberties with it.
The timing of that seemed super convenient to me. It always felt like, and I don't mean to talk about that show too much, but it always seemed to me like in that show, part of the thing that made Norman and his mother go crazy is just that they bought a hotel or motel and then immediately afterwards got no business. And then they just go crazy.
Well, yeah, I think they just rushed that show. I think it should have ended way, like, 40 years before the movie happened, because Norma's, like, a million years old in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think her age is supposed to be kind of ambiguous.
Yeah, I think she's supposed to be pretty, because everyone, as soon as they see her silhouette, they're like, oh, there's an old woman up there. There's an old woman. Like, she's all shrivelly, and like, especially when he's carrying her.
Well, sure, but we don't know how old, like, the actual woman was when she died. I mean, we just see a corpse. Like, I don't know how old the actual person was when she died. But yeah, what aspects of this movie do each of you guys find yourselves latching onto the most? Because it's kind of a something for everyone kind of movie if you can, the sort of film that it is. Uh, I would say. So what is it for you, Austin?
So for me, the big stuff that I like about this movie is everything with Marion at the start and then going to the hotel. And obviously the shower scene's great. I like all the detective stuff with Arbogast trying to investigate what happened. I'm not as crazy about the sister character and the boyfriend after the shower scene. I think they're not as strong of leads as Marion is.
That feels in a way kind of like hand-holding for the audience, because the whole rest of the movie really is about Norman, but it's like we still need eyes-in characters, or like people are not going to be able, and I think this is probably true in 1960 especially, people are not going to be able to stand watching the next hour and 10 minutes just following Norman around. Like, that's not going to work.
No, everything we learn about Norman is through the eyes of other people. It's through Arbogast. It's through, like you said, the sister and Sam.
And not conventional literary fiction by any means. Like, if I turn this in as a story in a writing class back in college, it would get like a C- probably, because it's like, well, you killed off what we thought was your protagonist less than halfway through your story, and then after that there really isn't a central protagonist exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
I
that's
think
sort of like a whole other trope in horror.
I think the book does make Sam and the sister the more of the protagonist. I think.
Oh, does it really? Because I know you've read that, and I still haven't gotten around to it. Everything I hear about it makes me think that I would not enjoy that at all because of.
Well, the book is not. Norman is definitely a protagonist. He's the first scene. The book opens with Norman.
Oh, okay, interesting.
He's a 40-year-old like overweight man with glasses.
I knew that. I just knew he was supposed to be like completely unsympathetic entirely, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to read that.
Yeah, he's not likable. He's more realistic as a psychopath and serial killer. Like he's into the occult, and he's all into these occult books. And like at the end. At the end of the movie,
I don't want realism. I want fascinating psychology, DJ.
When she goes to the room at the end of the movie, she goes to Norman's room, and it's kind of like preserved as a little boy's room. It's very different in the book. Like she goes to his room, and it's like a bunch of occult books everywhere, and books on psychology, and books on pornography and stuff. And like he's
interesting.
Like a really messed up dude. So yeah, the psychology is actually a little different than the way he explains it.
Is the thing as Freudian as the movie is, or does Hitchcock kind of draw that out more?
It's more so, I think. I think in the book,
interesting.
They specifically say at the end of the movie that he's not a transvestite. He was just embodying the mother character. In the book, the psychiatrist thinks that he was a transvestite long before she even died.
Oh, interesting. Because the movie says
Ed Gein, the character.
Yeah, because the movie says he was probably already kind of losing his mind before she died. And I think that's the big thing that the show latches onto in their in their super unhealthy, screwed up relationship with how manipulative she is, because the personality of her in his mind, of course, is that manipulative. But the question is, was that the dynamic before she died, or is that an exaggeration now in his head? Like, what kind of dynamic do they have now versus what it was when she was alive?
Yeah, you get to see that in the show. You never know that in the movie because you never met her. Everything you see is him.
And after 5 seasons of that, it's hard for me not to bring that to the movie. Where like I like that so much. That's kind of what I want it to be, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be. It's really difficult to know like if they had as much of a psychologically abusive relationship as they do in the show, or if it's that at all. Because all we really know is that he was jealous of the guys that she would get with, and that he would murder them, and then like once she's in his mind as another personality, now she's murdering all of the women that he gets interested in. So the question is, so like all the murderers are definitely him, like all the way up, but then the question is, what was their relationship that led him to that? Were they both crazy like they are on the TV show?
Yeah, well, I think we're supposed to infer that she was very controlling and she was very conservative, and like not just conservative, but like to the point where sex was like wrong and evil, and he was disgusting for thinking of it. And
yeah, I think you can make that assumption.
And he wasn't around women; he was only around his mother, which pushed him to have sexual feelings about his mother, which made him feel even worse about himself. And I think that's the idea.
Suddenly, I'm realizing
she doesn't like disgusting things. They disgust her.
She doesn't. She doesn't talk about disgusting things because they disgust her.
Yeah, suddenly I'm seeing some Carrie in that, and I'm wondering if that was an influence on Stephen King at all.
This was an influence on everything.
Oh, absolutely.
So much so that they just
Certainly
stole the name Sam Loomis and didn't.
I was gonna mention that. I never thought of that before.
Well, I mean, it is Janet Leigh's daughter in Halloween.
Which is crazy.
Oh, okay. So I mean, that's an homage before it's anything.
No, yeah, because Jamie Lee Curtis is her daughter.
I didn't remember that his name was actually Sam, though. I just heard Loomis again and was like, oh, wait a minute. That can't be a coincidence.
Yeah, because you got Sam Loomis there, and then in Scream they have Billy Loomis. They changed the first name for that one. But,
okay.
That's also a reference. And that, of course, also famously kills, like, the big star in the first scene. Not that it's in the first scene here, but you know what I mean, like a similar kind of thing.
But I mean, it's an appropriate movie, Halloween, to directly borrow things like that from this and homage it, because that kind of reinvents the genre, and then slashers really take off after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of the movie that hits that formula like on the head, and then everything else kind of just follows it.
I mean, there's stuff in between, but I think a lot of people would be hard-pressed to think of a slasher movie between Psycho and Halloween. Like, you've got Texas Chainsaw, of course, but, like, I think a lot of people aren't even aware of that franchise or wouldn't remember it. Yeah, I mean, lay people that don't follow horror stuff. I know there's big Texas Chainsaw fans, but, like, if I'd never done this channel, I wouldn't know what that was. Like, because I'm not a horror guy and I'm not around horror people, or I wasn't.
Still pumping out sequels,
until I was doing that. Yeah,
it just came out like a couple weeks ago.
Yes,
right?
And people are losing their minds about how bad it is. Apparently.
Why are you surprised, people?
The trailer is just Ghostbusters Afterlife with Jamie Lee Curtis from the 2018 Halloween like shoved in there.
Oh no!
Like, well, that's unfortunate. Does anybody at any point say "Evil dies tonight"?
No, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre takes place mostly in the day, they'd have to say Evil dies today.
Evil dies at brunch. I never answered the question that you posed.
I was just about to ask you again. Go ahead.
But I kind of did with all that rambling, because that is what I love about the movie so much, is all of the psychological stuff and the multiple personality disorder, and that always appeals to me. I love that. That's why I like the Hulk movie that no one likes. That's why I like characters like Hulk and the Lizard and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and all those characters in fiction. I love seeing that literalized in a character who actually changes into another person. And I know I know Bag said he has a hard time with this movie because it kind of fantasized that disorder a little bit too much. But that's why I like it, is because it's almost a supernatural component. So much so that I think that it's hard to put my finger on it, but I think that might be the reason why this movie is so iconic. I've seen about 10 Hitchcock movies now, and this one is so much more iconic. They're great. I love a lot of his movies, but this one is like on another level of iconic over those other movies. Like, I remember a lot of those movies, but I don't know why this one is, but it just sticks with me so much.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Anthony Perkins delivers one of the best performances in horror, let alone just cinema alone.
Yeah, but I mean, you got Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart and almost every Hitchcock movie, so I mean, he's got good competition. But yeah, I don't know why it's just like, and maybe that's why this one stands out, because it's a unique cast. He doesn't reuse any cast members in it.
Well, and this works because he's so unassuming, and the thing that always takes me aback every time I go back to this is that he's so weirdly likable, and also there's something really off about him all at the same time when you first meet him.
When he gets real serious, when she mentions putting his mother in the home, he literally leans forward and like gets all defensive. That's a great scene where you're like, oh, okay, something's off about this dude.
But like,
he has like a perfect balance of that, where
Yeah,
he's that kind of like socially awkward, like weirdo where you're like, there's something a little off about him. But he's also just like a seemingly nice guy.
yeah.
And, a ton of other actors could easily do that. And the craziness part of it would come out too strong.
Yeah, he's brilliant at that. At the end of every time he gets really somber and serious like that, he'll go like and just like laugh and do like an awkward like Andrew Garfield wave. That's something I noticed in this, that if Andrew Garfield was the right age at some point, he would have been a great Norman Bates. Not that I want any sequels or like reimaginings of this movie, but just him, like, if I don't know, if it was like a play of it or something, he would have been a great, with his kind of awkward mannerisms and stuff. I think he could.
Yeah, I totally see that.
He could have absolutely done a great Norman Bates.
The 100-yard stare thing, I think he could totally pull off.
Yeah, exactly. And the unassuming awkwardness. Yeah, I think that'd be great. But anyway, yeah, Anthony Perkins is perfect. I don't think anyone could have done it better.
Yeah, the balance that he finds is really between charisma and social awkwardness. And there's a lot of things that should be tells of the fact that his mother is not real, and that it's actually him the whole time, and that it's a disassociative identity thing really early. One of them is that he kind of keeps having these weird personality switches himself. Like the guy we meet and it's not because he's going back and forth between himself and his mother necessarily, but I do think that it's kind of a subtle tell. Like there's something that keeps changing about this guy. The guy we meet at the beginning does not seem like somebody, maybe a little socially awkward. Doesn't seem like somebody that would stutter. And then later he gets into this weird stuttery place whenever he's worried that somebody's getting too close to what's happening. And then he's
questioning him, yeah.
Weirdly, even a little bit sympathetic when you get to the end and you understand what all has been happening, that he's worried that people are getting close, not that they'll find out that he's his mother, but that something will happen to his mother. Like, we're never fully privy to everything that's happening with him until the very, very end of the movie, and neither is he. Like, he doesn't know what's happening either.
No, he thinks he's protecting her because he thinks she's actually killing people.
Yeah, like when he is, I wonder how many people in the theater, and again, at this point, this sort of ending is nearly a cliche. This movie comes out tomorrow, and immediately you go, well, he's the mother, right? Like he would have to be. It's like that's so often the twist now, is that the guy was this other person all along, right? But I wonder in 1960 how many people saw this movie and were thinking, when he comes in to clean up the shower scene, like it's his mother and he's cleaning it up, or maybe he's the one that did it. And I think one of the brilliant things about this movie, in not telegraphing what exactly the twist is too much, is that the whole way through, what the actual twist isn't who killed Marion, but that the mother is not real, right? Like, it almost doesn't matter in that moment if you're guessing, well, maybe he's the one that did it, because you're still not going to piece together what's going on with the mom in the house. Like, it almost doesn't matter at that point in the movie.
Well, and they are very brave. Like, they're very confident, because they literally tell you the end. Like halfway through,
yeah,
the sheriff says the mother's dead. Mother's been dead for 10 years. Like, she's...
And you should have it all pieced together at that point, but...
You do, and then the immediate next scene is them, like, saying, no, she's not, and they have, like, a conversation with each other, and he picks her up and carries her down in the fruit cellar, which is kind of a cheat that they use, like, an actual old woman's voice instead of him.
It is, but at least they're consistent about it, because what we can assume is that, and there's a lot of misleading things with just being in people's heads in general, but because I'm jumping around, but I think that's also a thematic thing with, like, the discussion about the traps and the cages we make for ourselves. So, like, we visit the person, like, inside of the trap they can't get out of. We do it with Marion early on in the car, and then we do it with him and his mother. And so I think you're right. Like, it's kind of a cheat, but at least we're consistent. And in both of the scenes where we hear his mother's voice, it's gotta be we're in his head. and not he's somehow making that voice himself.
Yeah, but she's hearing it. She's probably not hearing it as realistic as it's sounding. But to go along with what you were just saying, like,
oh, that's a good point. I'm sorry. There's like at least 3 scenes where we hear her voice. I totally forgot that she hears the both of them from the hotel into the house and not just yeah. Okay, that's weird. That means he does a really good old woman impression. He's a really good.
He's a ventriloquist, really.
Yeah, and also this isn't a big deal or anything, but
yeah, I had the same thing when I watched it. Every time I watch it, I have
Marion should not be able to hear them in that house. Like,
no, the house is like a football field away.
And she's inside. Like, I get that the window's open, but like she's inside a structure. They're that far away.
They try to make it work because Norman opens her window right before he goes up, but like they're in a closed house. Like
she'd be able to hear that there are voices maybe, but not precisely what they're saying. And we were talking about this in the Discord the other day, and I was like, if they did that kind of thing in the TV show, you wouldn't have had a show. Like, how many conversations happen in the house that nobody in the hotel was supposed to hear?
No, on TV, like on Friends, you can't even hear the conversations that are happening on the other side of the living room. In TV, you can't hear anything.
That is true.
No, I do think that the movie is stylistic enough that like I don't really have an issue with it, even though like logically, it doesn't like make a ton of sense.
I'm on the fence about whether it's quite heightened enough for particularly that kind of logic, because there's a lot of really smart logical stuff in the movie too, and I feel like that's a place where it kind of has its cake and eats it too a little bit too much.
Well, interestingly, on the first time I watched it...
It's not like it kills the whole movie or anything, but...
No. It's a small thing it's like a little gripe that I bring up. But interestingly, the first time I watched it, you're getting all of these thoughts in Marion's head as she's driving of like what her boss is going to say on Monday and what her sister's going to say when she finds out. And she's getting all these flashes in her head. And the first time I watched it, I wasn't sure like what actually happened and what didn't, like, because her boss walks by and I'm like, did he actually just walk by or is she just paranoid? Later we find out that he actually did see her, but that's all like really getting in your head and like confusing you. And then when Norman's arguing with his mother later, it's kind of that same echoey effect.
That's what I was alluding to earlier.
Oh, yep. Is she imagining the conversation? But then as soon as he comes down, she says what she said, if anyone talked to me like that, I wouldn't be. So they make very clear that she didn't imagine it. But for the first time, I was like, oh, this could kind of work if she's like imagining that, because Marion is looking for, it's crafted so well. So Marion in the very beginning, she wants a more traditional, it's really funny. She doesn't like the whole affair thing, like getting around. She wants a more traditional, like, authority figure in her life. She's like, we'll have a date and my grandma's picture will be on the mantle, like watching us. Then later on, she goes up and she's got this
establishing that mom motif right away.
Yeah, this very traditional, like, horrible mother figure, like yelling at her, and then she realizes she doesn't really want that and it's terrible. So I thought that could have been in her head, but it wasn't. But I think that would have been cool.
Well, and the conversation that they're having, the conversations that they have in her head are so specific and sound like precisely what those people would be saying, waiting for her to show back up or wondering where she is. But, like, I thought it was almost too realistic and too believable. I'm like, is this the movie somehow, like, telling you what conversations they're having off screen, but then she's reacting to thinking about it with her facial expressions? Like, that's lined up intentionally, so that whole thing is weird.
Yeah, exposition through paranoia is a trick I haven't seen before, but it works for the most part. I don't think it's too specific, but I think the one thing that I don't understand.
But I'm just saying that I agree with you that on first viewing it's confusing, and that's why it's confusing, and I don't know that there's any way around it. And I also think that it's smart for the sake of throwing you off the trail.
Yeah, it's good. But there's one thing that I don't understand that I didn't think about to this last viewing is. She goes to get a new car, but the policeman is standing right there the whole time. And then he goes up right after she leaves, so he can easily get the new tag from the guy who just sold it to her. So why does she continue to buy the car? What does she gain from switching cars if they have the new tag?
At that point, is it just that she's trying not to arouse any more suspicion than she has already?
Mm-hmm.
But then,
I think so, yeah.
But then
if the police department knows, I wouldn't think it would help that much. Just something I was thinking about.
No, that's a good point. I mean, I wasn't even thinking about it as she's doing. Yeah, you're right, of course. I wasn't even thinking about it as she's trying to switch tags so much as I just don't want to drive around in the thing everybody's used to seeing me driving around in.
Yeah, well, not just tag, but like he knows the make and model of the car she just drove out.
I'm not sure the movie even makes it clear enough where she's trying to get to initially. Like, I think she maybe says something to Norman in the hotel about where she's headed or something. I can't remember.
Oh, she's going to Fairville.
She's going out to the
where Sam lives.
To Sam Loomis. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that, but I'm not sure that the movie makes that super clear initially. I don't know. I remember on first viewing, I'm just saying the first time I saw this, I remember wondering about that, where I was like, is she like taking the money and running? Like, I was actually, the first time I saw this, kind of confused about that, and I don't think I just wonder if anybody else had that. I wonder if people were clear enough on her motivations for taking the money, because the movie does immediately, establish that right away, but the problem is, you think you're watching a different movie than what you're actually watching, so like keeping track of all of that becomes maybe kind of problematic. This is the kind of movie that requires 2 or 3 viewings, I think.
Yeah, they set up everything perfectly in that first scene.
Because the motivation is she needs money because she wants to get married and he's broke and working a dead-end job and can't make any money. And I don't know that you pick that up on a first viewing.
Yeah, you have to be the kind of person that like pays attention to the exposition that's being said in the very, very first scene. You have to be already like ready and alert.
And I'm bad at plot. I've always talked about this, where like, because I didn't answer my own question from earlier. I'm here for the thematic stuff and obviously the psychology. But the thing I latch onto hardest is the whole human condition question about being locked in personal cages. That whole thing is fascinating to me. That Norman Bates is like the personification of the choices that we may or may not actually have in being able to change and be better people. So Marion is trying to argue that if he wanted to, he could just leave his mother behind and go somewhere else. And I think Arbogast even suggests that later on. And at the end of the movie, it turns out, well, no, that was never an option, because he has to take her with him because she is literally locked in his mind, and so he becomes the living embodiment of the idea that we may not be able to change, and we may be trapped in whatever design our parents had for us, and. An average regular person that doesn't have that disorder, maybe we do have a choice, but it's really unsettling to have a personification of it, suggesting that there's a little bit of that in everybody.
It's weird how relatable his story is, even though it's so outlandish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right?
Yep,
so sure. Weird.
That's got to resonate with everybody on some level. And again, that's the Freudian thing. And then there's the whole eating motif, the whole devouring while destroying thing. That I was wondering if that was in the book at all, DJ.
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
The whole eating, devouring motif, which is also a big Freudian thing, where like he's always eating something.
Oh yeah, like I said, he's an overweight, and he is an alcoholic in the book. They cut that out.
Interesting.
They give him they do the exact same thing as Nicolas Cage in Ghost Rider. They replace the alcoholism with candy. Like he's always eating candy.
That's
like when
true.
Sam Loomis shows up, he just keeps eating candy.
I don't know why it works here when it didn't in that, but apparently that was the actor's idea.
No, he always gets wasted right before he turns into the mother. That's part of what sets it off.
Interesting.
Gets in a huge fight with her, can't stand up to her, and gets drunk, and then goes off, turns into her. But yeah, that's definitely in the book. I think you would get a lot out of the book. It's not as, like I said, he's not as likable as a character, but it's cool to get more of the background and like just the reason why you read a book after you watch a movie. There's just more.
Yeah, sure.
More. If you like that story, you get more, slightly different.
Yeah, I've always gotten the sense that the book to the movie is more like the book is more what people think of as being a serial killer, while like the movie is more that kind of like Bundy-ish thing where he's not exactly the person that you think of. We're like, oh, that person's clearly a serial killer.
Well, yeah, I think the book is based more on like a real event, like Texas Chainsaw.
But they're both based on the same character, Ed Gein.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, Ed Gein. Yeah,
who was a robber and he was a serial killer.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And he was a crossdresser, and he had stuff with his mother. But I actually got really into this entire. I didn't even talk about this. I got really into this franchise. After this, I watched the first 2 seasons. I watched this movie. I read the book, and then I read the second book, and which is very interesting. And I don't recommend it, but it was fascinating. The author hates the movie, despises it, and the entire second book is him writing about how the movie is like immoral. And
you told me about this.
I think it would be fascinating for you, but it goes to some really dark places. He goes out of his way to immediately make Norman really, really, really unlikable again, and a despicable character, because he doesn't like that they make him likable in this. And he also
and I could see that point from the author's perspective. I mean, but the nice thing as an adaptation is it seems like 2 pieces that are after different things.
Mm-hmm. And then the whole second book is about them making a movie about this incident, because he's mad that there's a movie about it, and the whole movie is about someone trying to make a movie, and then there's murders happening, and Norman.
Oh God, he went even farther than Stephen King with The Shining.
Like, I think the second book is fascinating, and then they go a completely different way with the second movie. They don't even touch his second book. They're like, this guy's crazy. He doesn't like movies. Get him out of here. We'll just make our own thing. But
and I've heard good things about the sequel. I always assumed it must be pointless and terrible, but people say good things about it, so I might try it at some point.
Yeah, I didn't like the second movie because
it's
an 80s horror movie, so it's just really gruesome. It's just completely the opposite thing. You see someone's like knife go through someone's face and sliced off the side. I was just like, ugh, not my thing. But it's interesting what they do with Norman and his psychosis. He doesn't get out of the psych ward nearly as fast as he does in the book. It takes like decades, but he finally gets out. But one last thing, I think it's fascinating that the author, though he hated the movie so much, he changes some things about his book for his second book. Like in the book, Norman cuts off her head in the shower. It's quick.
I was going to mention that.
He just one thing, but then they changed it. And then in the second book, when they call back to the first book, he calls it the sewing machine stabbing, which he gets straight from the movie that he hates so much. I'm like, did you forget what you wrote? Or I don't know. It's really weird.
He decided that was the one thing he liked better.
Yeah.
He's like, man, maybe I went too far with that. Maybe I didn't need to take her head clean off.
It's a cool line, though. I can't remember how it goes, but it's like he took the, I don't remember what he took the look off her face or the thought out of her mind along with her head or something. Like, it's a really succinct, cool line. I can't remember what he says.
Oh, crazy.
One of the things. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say something really offhand that you mentioned earlier. How in the pop culture this is, like in the zeitgeist this is, that people can't even see it. One of the things that bothers me the most is how much the music, the incredible music by Bernard Herrmann, has been just done to death in like comedy things. Like, stop doing that. Like, you're ruining.
The shower scene is like the most parodied scene.
I can't. Ever made. It's like someone slipping on a sandwich in a lunchroom. It's like and it's like, stop. You're ruining, and that's the same thing with like 2001: A Space Odyssey's music. Like, that music's been done to death with comedy stuff. So every time I'm watching these movies, I can't help.
Well, that's why on repeat viewings it's difficult for it. Well, I shouldn't even say repeat viewings. Watching it, this many years after it initially came out, it's just hard for that to have any kind of impact, even if you haven't seen it before. So, like, when you guys were talking about how well shot and edited the shower scene is, and how effective that is, like, It's hard for me to look at it and like I almost have to concentrate really hard on it to appreciate the artistry of it because I'm too familiar with it, and I was too familiar with it even before I saw it. Like that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's like how everything to the Matrix for
it
like
kind of just
5
becomes a
years
study. Yeah, exactly. It stops having the impact it should. Like you're
That's where it comes in
desensitized
handy.
to it, and not in a violence way, in just a cultural osmosis way.
Yeah, that's where it comes in handy that you didn't grow up watching very many movies because you didn't see all that stuff.
One thing I think is, and I didn't know this until recently. One thing that's really interesting about the history of this is all the links that Hitchcock went through to make sure that people didn't know not just the ending, but especially that Marion dies, earlier than halfway through the movie. Apparently, nobody was allowed to walk into the theater while the movie was playing. If you didn't get there on time, you couldn't be let in. And apparently,
it's a big part of the marketing. Yeah.
Apparently, every movie theater cooperated with this, and it was a rousing success. And yeah, that's wild. And they advertised the movie really hard on that. Like, you can't, if you didn't get there on time, you don't get to see the movie. That was super smart.
There was like a grindhousey way that this was kind of marketed, in that it was more marketed on like, the way that you see it and not the movie itself. You know what I mean? Where a lot of those kinds of groundhouse things are like, nobody wants you to see this or whatever. Well,
yeah,
this
it's almost viral before viral in a way. And obviously word of mouth ends up really helping a thing like this, because it's like the critics weren't allowed to see this ahead of time, and nobody really knew what they were seeing. So then when people went and started talking about it, it was this like, everybody has to go see this.
It's like it would have been like what everyone thought No Way Home was going to be, where there wasn't going to be a trailer. They could, now that we've seen how good that movie's doing, they totally could have got away with just talking about the movie instead of showing stuff from the movie.
If that trailer,
in their defense, how would you know?
Walking around the green screen, being like,
if that, well, no one knows who John, whatever his name is, so it wouldn't work. It'd have to be Feige or something.
Yeah, exactly. If it was just Feige walking around a green screen, being like, yeah, Spider-Man's a good character. We like him quite a bit.
This is where Doc Ock says the palm of the sun in the palm of my hand for the 3rd time in the movie.
Yeah,
imagine.
He goes, you're going to see things you've never seen before, and tons of things you have. I'm sorry, what were you saying, Austin?
Imagine trying to explain to Disney and like AMC and everything that you can't let anyone in the movie if they're late. Like, they'd be like, get out of here.
Yeah, you can never do that now.
Anyone can come in. I don't care if someone comes in like 20 minutes to the end.
Because now the response would be, as soon as anybody sees it, the whole universe is going to know what happens anyway. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. That's so sad. That's a bummer.
I'm sorry, Austin. You were going to say something.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and then you get the moment where Hitchcock walks up to the shower, and I think he grabs the curtain, and he starts to pull it back, and then he's just like, no, and then he pulls it closed again, and that's the end of the trailer.
Well, and then another thing that they would do is they intentionally had a casting call, a fake casting call for the mother, so that people wouldn't know that she wasn't a real character. And not just the voice. Yeah. Like, of course, they had to cast the voice, but they also, like, pretended like they were getting, like, a major famous actress to play the mother.
That's kind of like that in, what's the movie? The Amazon remake of Suspiria, where they have, like, a fake actor that plays a character, but it's just Tilda Swinton dressed as a man. She plays 3 characters in that movie.
See, it would be so ruined. That's what I hate these days. You go to IMDb, Anthony Perkins, it would say Norman and mother. And it's like, oh, well, there it is. We know who the mother is.
I hate modern TV shows for that, where there'll be like a major recurring character you haven't seen in 3 seasons. And it's like a big freaking deal that they're back. And then in the opening credits over the first sequence after the intro. It's like the actor's name and sometimes the character, but like if you're familiar enough and you know who the actor is, you can be like, okay, yeah, Q's in this one. Like I know, like that's so annoying. I hate it.
I had that as a kid with Spectacular Spider-Man because I hadn't read the Master Planner stuff yet, and I remember watching that in that show and being like, "Wow, like who could this character be?" And then I get to the end of the credits and it's like this person is Doc Ock and the Master Planner, and I was like, "Oh, like I guess
you read the credits as a child?
Already spoiled it.
Hey, I was
a
the
weird
kid
child.
that watched the behind the scenes for Spider-Man 3 more than the movie. So
Oh, I watched the crap out of those Sam Raimi behind the scenes stuff. I found the Easter eggs on the DVDs where Doc Ock was dancing to the to the Fiddler on the Roof song. Oh, remember bonus features, guys?
I do. I miss them.
Good times.
DJ, real quick before we finish up, do you want to complain about your one big major thing that you can't deal with in this movie? Because you haven't brought it up yet, and I'm shocked by that.
I have one huge gripe. I was wondering if we were going to...
I agree with this, by the way. Go ahead.
I was wondering if we were going to pivot into negatives. We never did, so I'll just do it here. We had like a minor one earlier, a couple minor ones. This is a major one. And I don't know if it's because because I read the book after this, and it was weird when I saw it the first time. When the final scene, when Norman is coming in and he's like, it's terrifying, and the sister, we keep saying the sister, I can't remember her freaking name, that she's screaming, and
Lila Crane,
Lila
or Lila,
Lila, that's what it is. Anyway, she's screaming. He comes in.
It's usually Lila, but I don't remember anybody calling her by her first name. I'm sure they did. I just don't remember.
Yeah,
he called her the protagonist.
When Sam tackles him at the end and is like holding him back, holding the knife, he's doing.
That's quite a choice in a movie where there kind of isn't one, right?
But yeah, anyway, Sam is tackling Norman at the end, and he's doing a very specific choice. It's this. Because he's supposed to be screaming. He was screaming in the scene.
And obviously.
And they cut the scream. That's the big.
And they didn't replace it with anything.
No.
It looks unfinished.
That's the big thing. Well, it's because the whole time he's doing the mother voice throughout the movie, it's an actual old woman doing the voice.
Right.
But they didn't put the old woman screaming. Like at the end of the book.
Who, by the way, kept voicing her apparently in the sequels to this.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Cool.
So she wasn't Aunt May age. She lived until the 80s.
She lived.
I love that you guys take drinks every time I make a joke. It makes me feel so much better when you almost spit on your microphones. The big haunting image at the end of the book is as he's being tackled to the ground, he's giving this like blood curdling, torturous scream, but an old woman's voice comes out, and that's when it really cements the fact that he's gone full mother, and he's not just dressed up. And then they shoot it that way in the movie. He's clearly performing the scream, but then they don't ADR the scream in, and it's just silent. It starts when he first runs in. There's like an old woman like, ah! But then when he actually falls to his knees and like does the scream, it's just silent.
They cut it out, and it makes me wonder if Hitchcock put it in and saw it and it didn't play, and they just decided like maybe it was the 11th hour and they couldn't have Perkins come back in and ADR it or something, or like having some other random person do it seemed like a bad idea. Like I would have to, honestly, DJ, I would have to see it to know if it was effective and believable, because it's one thing to be ambiguous about the voice and Marion hears it but doesn't see him doing it, because I still feel funky about that whole thing. But to actually have that voice come out of his mouth is almost too supernatural, because you're right.
Yeah.
The way the movie plays the multiple personality thing, it does feel like it's heightened and unrealistic and played almost like a thing that doesn't happen in real life. However you feel ethically about that whole thing, because of course that is a real disorder, but in this movie's defense, a lot of things up until like the 80s did play DID this way, where it was like
it is a 60s film.
Yeah, where it's like this. Say it again.
Said it is a 60s film.
He's just saying up until the 80s we still did it this way.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, this is also a '60s film. So,
Yeah,
like, yeah.
It's back in the day where if we did this kind of thing, it's novel, I guess is what I'm saying,
Yeah.
right? And so
It's a perspective thing.
it's already playing it as not just an unusual thing, but an almost impossible thing. It would have been a bridge too far, maybe, to be like, and also his vocal cords have shifted, and that voice comes out, but would it be any sillier than seeing nothing at all? Or hearing nothing at all? What's weird is, I haven't heard a lot of people complain about that. It was always funky to me, and then when you mentioned it in the Discord, I was like, thank you, DJ. That always drives me crazy. I don't know why nothing comes out of her mouth.
Yeah,
out of his mouth, rather.
I'm almost 100% certain that that's the case, that they tried it and they didn't think it worked, because every other scene when he's doing the voice, he's off screen. It never shows his mouth.
And it's weird because they're so meticulous about every other detail. Like, apparently, they worked like crazy to make sure that there wasn't any, like fidgeting or anything from Marion when she's dead on the
oh yeah, she has to stay still for so long.
Yeah, on the floor. And somebody came in to one of the screenings they were doing just in house, and I forget who it was, but it was somebody who had been an editor. It was a lady that was an editor, and she noticed one frame where she twitched, and they had to go back and fix it. And so, I mean, they were that meticulous about it, where it's like, well, she's dead, she can't be moving. But then at the end of the movie, where they're that meticulous about the internal logic, it's like, yeah, he's just doing this.
He's just,
that does not belong in this movie.
Around. Yeah, I think it had to be like they tried it, they didn't like it for whatever reason. I mean, I feel like that's unforgivable. You kind of have to go back and reshoot that scene if you're gonna do that. But
Alex Barron in the comments here disagrees with us. We haven't read hardly any comments tonight. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I always thought the ending was really creepy. Just having Norman's mouth looking like it's screaming with no sound coming out. That scene really works for me. And I mean, I guess it does for most people because, like I said, I haven't heard a lot of people complain about it. And it is creepy, but the problem is it takes me out because it feels unintentional.
I also never noticed it until DJ said it, and watching it this time, I was like, "Oh, that is kind of weird."
But nobody watched this.
But DJ, I'm going to suggest
that scene and the scene after it, though.
For everybody, sorry guys.
I'm going to suggest a fix for it though, because I was watching it after you mentioned that, so I was looking for it this time. And like I said, it had bugged me before, but I was like, what would you do to fix it besides just have somebody come in and ADR it? I think, and this is a thing that you wouldn't pick up on probably, this is a subconscious thing for most viewers, I would think. I think the bigger issue, DJ, is that there is any sound around it. If you dropped all the sound out and all you had was the string music, we've hardly talked about the score with this movie, but if all you had was score, I don't know that it would feel like a stylistic choice, I guess is what I'm saying. But the problem is you've got sound effects of things falling and people breathing, and like that's the problem, is that there's any sound in that scene.
You'd have to drop Lila's scream.
Yeah.
That would be the big tell, is when you see her scream and nothing comes out. Then you would know, your brain would know.
But also, even while his mouth is open like that, there's sounds of other things around him. Cut all that out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the music's strong enough to do it, to carry the scene on its own. And it does for most people, apparently. But yeah, that was only my big
Alex says it was Hitchcock's wife who pointed out Marion's corpse twitching. I couldn't remember who it was, but...
Wow, what a tough crowd. His own wife. Maybe go back and redo it.
You gotta fix it.
But yeah, we should talk about, I know you have a big gripe, Austin, or something you would take out. That's not my big gripe.
Yeah, it's the scene after it. So this film, I think, it isn't hand-holdy at all. Like, it just gives you the information. You can follow it. I don't think there's any issue. And then you get to the end, and we get 5 minutes of just a guy standing there explaining the entire film to you. And I don't think that's necessary at all. And I would completely cut that.
Ooh.
I don't agree with that at all.
I don't agree with that at all. I love that scene.
That is not what's happening in that scene.
Like, this is it, and it just feels like we're explaining it to the back row to me.
I think that's.
But when you say explain, like that, I'm sorry, Austin, that strikes me as hyperbolic. He's not telling you everything you just saw. He's not explaining the movie to you.
But I can understand everything, every single thing that he's saying just watching the movie. Like, it just feels like he's explaining everything you can just get from watching it.
I don't. You understood everything with the psychosis from watching it?
Yeah, like he's got like no information. It feels like, okay, this is the 60s, no one's going to understand, and they're just going to be like, oh, look at that weird Norman dressing up like a woman. We need to explain the entire mental thing, but I think it's just inherently there in the movie, especially like all of that, especially at the end where you get like the face flash over him. Like, it's all just there. I don't need that scene.
I think that's modern sensibilities. I don't think people back then would have understood I think when people saw him running with the dress, like, whoa, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
And then they had to.
No, and I think it is for the audience, yeah, but I don't think it's necessary.
I like that scene. I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes Scooby-Doo fan. I love the mystery wrap-up scene at the end. That's the best part of a mystery movie. And he's not just making it up. Like, he talked to the mother personality, like, personally. He's getting this from the source.
Yeah, when you say he has no information, we do need him at the very least to tell us that the mother character is taken over completely, because just cutting back to him and seeing her talking to him would still not totally tell you that that's happening. Like, I think there is some exposition there that's necessary.
And he's not explaining... like you said, like he was like, oh, he's a transvestite. He's not explaining that he clearly says she's not a transvestite.
No, I'm saying that scene is there since the audience doesn't watch it and say that. Like, okay. It's just to be like, the audience will watch it and just think this. We need a scene where we come out and say, like, no, this is actually what the movie is. But I think that's just inherently there in the movie, and that it's just kind of going, no, okay, look.
I think maybe on multiple.
I think you're right that it serves that purpose, but narratively, like, that could be the main motivation for it being there. Keep in mind that Hitchcock wanted to cut it, or was at least kicking around cutting it, and the writer, I forget his name, was able to convince him that it needed to be there, because he was afraid that people would walk out during that scene. That is just like this pointless exposition scene, and the writer was like, nah, like people are like, after the ending we just gave them, they're not going to leave the theater. Like, that's not going to happen. But so you're right. Like, that might be one of, if not the main motivation behind it. But I do think it serves the narrative purpose of explaining to ignorant people that are of the characters that are there in that scene, like ignorant of psychology, like what exactly was going on there. Like, we do have to. It would be weird if we just never saw Sam and the sister again. Like, they at the very least need this stuff explained to them.
Yeah, they're the ones asking all the questions in that scene. Like, we have to see her. Like, he's the one who tells her that her sister's actually dead.
And I think there's a point being made about the perspective of the culture right then, of like not understanding, and even though what he did was horrible and should be held accountable to some degree, that in certain ways the guy is a victim as well. That, like, you have to appreciate that there's a mental illness at play there. And I think if that scene's not there, it's hard to, I mean, like, you could see it as, if not soapboxy, just like being too wrapping up in a bow or telling the audience what they're supposed to take from it. But at the same time, I kind of need to know to some degree where the movie stands on the mental illness side of it. I think the fact that they like bring him a blanket at the end, and they don't just like throw him behind bars and like you know, lock him away and throw away the key, like, I think that's all really important. Like, the movie is making some kind of a point about mental illness, and that the society does not sympathize with people like this. And if you don't have that scene, I don't know that you would get that.
Yeah, or doesn't even understand it. Like, Sam has the line like, "Did he kill him or didn't he? What's going on?" And he's like, "He didn't. He didn't. He didn't. He didn't."
Yeah, like, you're complaining that a scene is handholdy, that with a culture that needs its handheld. Like that's.
I don't know. I just see it like as if, say like Halloween, you end with Laurie Strode and this Sam Loomis, sitting in the room, and she says, "Was that the boogeyman?" He says, "Yes." It would. I feel like this is like if they then cut to her being explained. Okay, this is what was happening. This is who this was, and it was just like a 5-minute sequence that isn't necessary. And I sure there's stuff that's maybe there that is cool, but it's like 5 minutes of just explaining the movie outside of just those specific moments.
Yeah, but also that's the reason why I'm there. So I don't see it as explaining the movie. I see it as, oh, this is really, really interesting, and I want to hear all about this.
Yeah, that's part of it for me as well.
Fair enough. I don't know. To me, it's just, don't worry, audience. This is what's happening. But if you guys don't have that, that's fine.
And the thing is, I'm very often the first person to be like, this is forced exposition and dialogue. For some reason, it doesn't bother me with this particular case.
Yeah, and like I said, for me, it falls into that that Scooby-Doo wrap-up scene where Sherlock Holmes explains everything to the bumbling police officer.
It also helps that it's broken all the rules by this point anyway. Like, it's, I don't mean to say that I'm not going to hold this movie to any kind of standard, because it's not traditional narrative in a lot of ways, and because it's heralded as a masterpiece, so we can't critique it. Like, I have already critiqued some things about it. But at the same time, when I get as kind of acclimated to a thing like this that clearly isn't just a literary thing, I will admit that it's easier for it to get away with certain things with me, maybe because it's like, well, this is playing by a different set of rules. So
yeah,
you can have an exposition head more easily in a movie that kills off what I thought was its protagonist 45 minutes in.
Well, yeah, and it's the end of the movie where it's had you like putty in its hands the whole time. It's not like if that happened at the beginning of the movie, then it would have took me out. But I'm with the movie at this point.
Yeah, fair enough.
And the ending is amazing. We haven't talked about the ending.
Might have helped if
The
that
ending is
character had,
perfect.
for some reason, been in the movie earlier. Because it is just like a random psychiatrist that comes in and starts talking and leaves.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
if
the
we
writer
made
comes
this
in
movie,
and is like, here you go.
Yeah.
well,
I
if we
read
made
the
this,
script.
if we made this movie now, it would have opened with the flashback scene to Norman in the insane asylum after he killed his mother, and that doctor
Yep.
would have also been there, and that would have
If
set up
this
the
were
doctor.
made now, it would do my least favorite horror trope that we do with a lot of these kinds of movies, which is you open the scene with like a grisly murder to be like, don't worry, this is a horror film. I know the rest, like we're gonna have boring 20 minutes up to the next
But
kill.
stick around,
but
guys.
don't worry, it's right here at the start.
No, instead, you have 45 minutes of lead up thinking you're watching a different kind of movie that might be about like a love triangle or something, and then and then you get the kill, and then you have to watch two people that you've barely spent any time with going and investigating and trying to find out all the things that you know already, which should bother me, but again, kind of works okay in this particular instance.
Well, and you don't even know based on the title that you're watching a horror movie, because Psycho, when in the beginning, you could totally believe that Marion is the psycho because she went crazy. We all go a little mad sometimes. She went crazy, and she did this crazy thing and did a crime movie, because that's what Hitchcock made all the way up till this was crime movies, and that was a Hitchcock movie. The first third of this movie is a normal Hitchcock movie where she just has a random crime
When I
spree.
first saw this, I thought the title was too
Psycho-cop.
generic, where I was like, I mean, any crazy person that kills someone you could call a psycho. Like, what does that have to do with specifically this case? And then and then on this viewing, I was like, it's a better title than I ever gave it credit for, because the point is you don't know who the psycho is until you get to the end of the movie.
Yeah, and that's just the title of the book, so we can't really give him credit for that. But yeah, it's a good title.
Well, sure, but I mean, at that point, I'm critiquing, the initial material that you get the adaptation from, I suppose. But
Yeah, if you guys, I have the actual MP3 audio book file of that. I should send that to you guys if you ever have time to listen to it. That would be an interesting listen, or that would be interesting for me to talk to you guys after you listen. to
yeah,
it.
absolutely. Well, guys, we're well over an hour. Anything else you want to make sure that we bring up? There's all kinds of things we could be talking about, of course, but
yeah, we didn't really. I mean, we didn't get into any of the like film school, film nerd stuff about this, but that's not usually what we talk about on this channel. So I think that's fine. I do love the final scene where they like. Not only do they superimpose her coming out, them pulling the car out of the swamp, right over his face, but in a split second where they put like a skull in the middle of the crossfade, like it fades to like a skull over his teeth, and then it fades.
It's the mother's like that image of her face.
Yes.
It's her corpse.
Yeah.
That's so
perfect.
Cool. So cool.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great.
And her performance is great. Like whoever did that voice acting and that, because the final scene he's not talking. It's just he's just smiling, and then, but her little wouldn't even harm this fly.
Because it would disgust me.
It's great. What a good haunting ending. I like it. And then it just says the end because the credits are at the beginning because it's a super rare film.
Brandon's getting dogged on. He's not even here.
I haven't even seen that War Games commentary yet, but I've
you
heard
can't
about
reference videos that like hardly anybody watch.
Sorry, that's what I'm here for. Deep cuts.
Very deep cuts. Well, everybody, thanks a lot for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The ReQuest. Austin, next time we're going back to comics, and we've got a request. Let me remind myself. Oh, yes. Blue Dragon 5 requested an arc of Gail Simone's Deadpool. So we're going to do the first trade of that, which I've never read.
I didn't even know she had a run on Deadpool.
Uh-huh.
Cool.
I think her run was mid-2000s, and she's got thanks to credit in one or both of those movies, I think. Like, hers is considered one of the seminal runs on that character. I want to say she's only one or two removed from Joe Kelly. Like, she's pretty early.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably just a bit before Joe Kelly's run.
Yeah, because you've got the what's it called, Deadpool Classic trades, and I think when you get to, maybe she's even the one right after him, but I'm not remembering because I'm not like a big Deadpool guy. But I think Joe Kelly's got the first like 4 or 5 volumes, at least 5 because I reviewed those. So at least 5 volumes, and then I think she's by like 7 or 8 of Deadpool Classic, so she's shortly thereafter.
Okay, cool.
So
that'll be interesting.
Do some of that next week. Yeah. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and we'll see you again real soon. I'm going to come back tomorrow night for another show, probably Counting Crypto Freaks for anybody that cares about that. And then Thursday night, we're doing a really exciting Captain Logan show. I'm going to have Jonathan Ying as my guest co-host that evening. He is the creator of my favorite board game now, Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. We're going to talk that game. We're going to talk Power Rangers, gaming at large, and anything else you guys want to talk about. So if you are so inclined, please pop in that night. I want to try to draw as big of a crowd for him as humanly possible, and hopefully we'll have him on for a couple of hours. And anyway, we'll see you again real soon. I was Captain Logan, and that was Austin, the Day Ghost.
What?
No, your line is
and DJ Martinez.
DJ the Dolphin Hater. That's me. Dropping deep cuts about Brandon's ignorance.
Watch the Birds parody of from The Simpsons with dolphins.
Oh, I've never seen an episode of Simpsons, so I think we're good. I think we're okay. I don't think I'm gonna stumble upon the dolphin episode.
Isn't that weird though? He said dolphins at the beginning, and then there's that episode with dolphins. Anyway, I don't know how that happened.
It's a bookend.
All about it. That's what we do here. Full circle.
And this is the last time you'll ever see DJ on the show.
Bye, guys.
Anyway, later, folks.